This is a new ministry which is just starting. Reverend Hood needs your help in sharing the good news of Jesus Christ and His power throughout the world. If you would be so kind as to send a donation to Nicholas Hood III Ministries of any amount, Reverend Hood will send you a free complimentary copy of his book of original personal prayers and beautiful photographs entitled The Test, The Strength, The Endurance, and The Way Out. We appreciate your support, and in this way, you can partner with Reverend Hood in sharing the good news of Jesus throughout the world. Please make your check out to Nicholas Hood III Ministries and mail it to 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
You know why I really love Nick Hood as a minister? I watched his father do it, and he took over for the church, and he was one of us, but he really turned out to be a great minister. I know it's hard, and that's something that I know that all ministers may not be doing what they're doing because for the right reasons, but I know it's hard. I know he's a beautiful man, and we've been knowing each other for over 50 years. I believe in him. He's inspired me in so many ways to do what I'm doing and try to be the best at it. Make sure you watch Nick Hood's Ministries. You'll never be the same.
Welcome to Nicholas Hood III Ministries, a ministry of hope, spiritual inspiration, personal power guided by Christian love. May the power of God's Holy Spirit fall upon you as you sit back and enjoy today's program. I introduce you now to Pastor Nicholas Hood III.
I want to talk about free will and destiny. Free will is the ability to think and act for yourself, but destiny is what we often either assign to God, or for people who don't believe in God, they just say it just is supposed to be. And the other day I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were talking about this struggle between free will and destiny. Why is it that some people do well and others in the same family do very badly? Why is it some people are successful, well-adjusted emotionally, well-adjusted, spiritually, but then you have another person from the same family who sometimes, just makes the worst choices. They get it themselves into trouble. And whose fault is it? Is it because God destined them to go one way? Or is it the freedom of will that God has given us? And I, as a person, I believe in free will. I believe that God loves us so much that God created us as unique individuals. In Psalm 8, David says, "What is man that thou art mindful of him, or the son of man that thou dost consider him? For thou hast made him just a little lower than the angels." And that's what I was sharing with my friend the other day. I said, what that psalm is really saying is that you and I are made just a little lower than God. That's what David says. We are made a little lower than the angels. And as I talked with my friend, I began to think about my own life. And I began to ask myself somewhat penetrating and hard questions about why is it I turned out the way that I am? Why is it I am the preacher that I am today? Why is it I'm the minister that I am today? Why is it I've been married 49 years? Why is it my children up to this point seem to be doing pretty well? And I really believe that, we could always say it's destiny. We're destined for the lives that we are leading right now. But what I shared with my friend is the problem I have with destiny is, does that also mean that somebody is destined to be a criminal? And I think that's unfair. Is somebody destined to get divorced? Is somebody destined to have an unhappy marriage? Is somebody destined to be poor? Is somebody destined to die of cancer? Is somebody destined to one day end up with multiple sclerosis or Parkinson's? What is it that God has really planned for us? And I just can't accept that. I don't believe that God has chosen you to be poor. I don't believe God has chosen me to be poor. That God has chosen me to be unsuccessful or successful. I believe that God has given each of us the tools to live the lives that we are leading. And God has given us the mind to think. God has given us legs and hands and hearts, and eyes to see and ears to hear. And God has given us every good opportunity to do the best that we can with our lives. And it's so funny that as I was talking with my friend, and I shared this with him, I said, it was last Sunday night, we were talking. And I said, it's so interesting that we should be having this conversation. I said, because earlier this afternoon, this last Sunday afternoon, I had been invited by a little boy, 12-year-old boy in my church, and his mother. She's a football mom. And the boy had been in my confirmation of faith class. And I asked all the children in the class, what do you want to be when you grow up? And when we got to this little boy, he said, I want to be a professional football player. And, I took a look at him, and for 12 years of age, he's a big boy, 140 pounds. I happen to remember my weight when I was 12, because like him, I was playing Little League football. But for me, I weighed 115 pounds. That boy weighs 140 pounds right now. And they invited me, he and the mom invited me to come out to the old Tiger Stadium. That's the professional ballpark in Detroit where the Detroit Tigers used to play. And they've made it into an open field. They did not remove the grass. And they've built up around it. So it's a very professional atmosphere for these children. And the boy told me, he said, now this is the off season. And in the off season, we play 7-on-7. I said, what is that? He said, well, really, that's touch football. So there are no helmets, no pads, but there's no tackling either. You have to touch somebody with two hands, and that counts as a tackle. And so I was fascinated to see it. They must have had 8, maybe 10 teams, because they had the field divided into what looked like 4 sections. And these kids were going at it. We got through the first game, and then we moved to the opposite side of the field for the second game. And as we moved to the opposite side of the field, I noticed that there was a delay for the game to start. And as I looked closer, it dawned on me that the reason why the game was delayed was because a player on one of the preceding games had been injured. And the little boy, these are all 12-year-olds, he is stretched out on the field, and from the point where I saw the boy on the ground, it looked like he had been on the ground about 30 minutes. They had the adults, looking at him. They finally called for an ambulance. And then when the ambulance arrived, it took another 10 or 15 minutes for them to gently get the boy on a stretcher, and then they put him on a gurney and they rolled him out. And I looked at that, and it gave me chills. One, and when they wheeled him out, they wheeled him right in front of us in the stands, and the boy didn't move. And all I could think of was, when I was 12, I played on a team, a Little League team, the first black Little League football team in the Detroit area called West Side Cubs. And a boy playing next to me, I was a defensive end, he was a defensive back. He got kicked, I think accidentally. We didn't know if it was an accident or not, but he was kicked in his kidney and he lost a kidney. And like the boy Sunday, he was stretched out on the field. And when I think of, the thought went through my mind as I'm looking at the boy in the field, and I began to think about my teammate who I saw stretched out on the field, just like that boy Sunday. I said, is this the will of God that this boy should be, my teammate be kicked in his kidney and lose a kidney? Is it the will of God that that boy that I saw Sunday, who's stretched out on the field, may have a chronic injury, a catastrophic injury that may alter his life dramatically for the rest of his life? And no, I don't believe that. I just cannot believe in a cruel God. I can't believe in a God who decides from on high that some people are going to live and live well, and some other people are not going to live so well. I don't believe that's the will of God. I really believe that God has determined that you and I should live good lives, productive lives, well-fed lives. God has not ordained that you should be hungry. God has not ordained that you should be sad. God has not ordained that you live in a dysfunctional house. I don't believe that. And you and I are really called, from my perspective, we are called to live to the promise of what God has determined for us. God did not call you to be a drunkard. God has not called you to be a drug addict. God has not called you to be a ne'er-do-well. God hadn't called you to be a person who wastes time, wastes money, wastes relationships, and wastes love. That's not what I think God has called for your life. I believe that even in your old age, God has called you to be happy. I believe that when you're young, God has called you to be happy. And for the life of me, when I start thinking about destiny, as an older man now, I'm in my 70s. As I look back on my life, I think about how many things have come together in such a wonderful way. If I look at it and say, surely the hand of the Lord has been in my life. Let me show you a little reason why I say that. How much time we have, Ryan? I'm good. So let me share with you another story. When I think about destiny and free will, I moved to Detroit with my family in 1958. I was turning 8 years of age, and I was born in New Orleans. And in New Orleans, in the segregated South, I had a wonderful life. But part of the reason why my life was wonderful was because my parents, like many of the other parents in the African American community in New Orleans in the early 50s, sheltered their children. And so there was a lot about racism I never saw. I never really experienced. I didn't experience a segregated bathroom till I was 12 years of age, and it was in New Orleans. I went back there just to visit my godparents and others, and I had to use the bathroom touring the Cabildo. That's the museum in the French Quarter. And I just had to use it. And it happened, it was the week before the civil rights legislation went into effect. But I can truly say I have used the segregated bathroom. And so I was thinking about it because also last week I was asked to participate in officiating a funeral. And when the funeral was over, it was off-site. The widow wanted everybody, she had passed out a handkerchief with a photograph of her husband on the one side of the handkerchief. And she said, we're going to have a New Orleans style second line. And I've experienced a second line in Detroit, but to be honest, I never really experienced a New Orleans second line. And so that evening, you know, in the second line, everybody had the handkerchief and had a picture of her husband, and we marched around the room to a, you know, nice, they had a New Orleans style band. And it was great. But I went home and I Googled or I did a YouTube search for New Orleans style second line. And to my surprise, it was nothing like the sanitized second line I saw at this funeral. For starters, there weren't people walking in line single file. It was like the whole city street was covered with people, and they're not only doing a two-step, but people are dancing, they're gyrating, some are bending down to the ground, they're jumping up in the air, they're turning around, some have bottles of beer. It's just a wild kind of party, community party. And it dawned on me, I said, you know, as an adult, I've gone back to New Orleans. I've seen an adult Mardi Gras. I remember the Mardi Gras as a child with the floats and the people with the nice costumes. I said, but I'd never seen anything like what I saw on YouTube with the second line. And I encourage you, pull down a YouTube video on the second line, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, people have been killed doing the second line. And I know a guy who lost a brother who was killed in a second line. And so it fascinated me. And it dawned on me, I said, my parents took me and my little brother out of New Orleans before we could experience that second line. And I'm not saying that to say that second lining is bad, but what I'm saying is that, you know, the second line, I think, is in certain neighborhoods. It may not be in all neighborhoods of New Orleans. But I wonder, what would my life have been like had I grown up with the second line? Would I be one of the people in the line dancing? Would I be one of the people, you know, I turned out to be a musician. Would I be in the brass band providing the music for it? And how would my life have turned out had I stayed there just even a few years longer than we did? The point that I'm making is I can't say it was the destiny of God. My father told me he just wanted to pastor a church that could pay more money for the preacher than what he was being paid in New Orleans. But the point that I'm making is I don't want to assign destiny to God. But if you look at my life and how I've turned out, you know, my wife says I was destined to be a preacher. She said that happened from the time you were an infant. You didn't have any choice in the matter because your daddy was a preacher, his friends were preachers, you were surrounded by preachers. You know, that's all you knew. So I want you to think about this. I'm going to pause now and take a little break. We're going to come back. And when we come back, and during the break, I want you to ask yourself this question of destiny and faith. And ask yourself, and free will, ask yourself, how has my life turned out? And has my life turned out the way that it is because I was destined to be one way? Or has my life turned out the way that it has because of freedom of will? The good choices and the bad choices that I've made are my life. Think about it, and I'm going to probe that question when we come back. Thank you so much.
America used to be considered a godly country. It doesn't seem to be that way to me now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful or anything, but it's so many things they're okaying for the wrong reasons. There's not godly reason. People need to really open up the Bible, the Bible, and look in it, and really get it into their heart. And this, the way Reverend Hood is doing this is a comfortable way. It's not forcing anything on people. It's a comfortable way and a loving way for it to continue to move in that direction.
The way Reverend Hood presents it, you can understand it, and it makes you want to delve into the Bible even more so that you can see more, because it seems like the program goes off too fast. We need the bread of life.
We really do.
These days, we need it more than ever. And Reverend Hood's ministry on TV is giving us our bread.
Hello, I'm Nick Hood, pastor of the Plymouth United Church of Christ in Detroit, and today I'm talking about the contrast between freedom of will and destiny. Psalm 8 says, what is man that thou art mindful of him, the son of man that thou dost consider him? For he hath made you just a little lower than the angels. And to me, what that means is that God has given us a lot of authority. God has given us minds to think, hands to use, feet and legs to walk, hearts to beat, eyes to see, ears to hear. God has made us complete packages. And the question that I want you to ask yourself is, when you think about your life and how your life has turned out, how much credit do you give to God? With this freedom of will that God has given you? Or are you on the side that says God assigns a particular destiny for every individual? And I've tipped my hand in that I've shared my belief. My belief is that I don't want to ascribe too much to the destiny that God gives to us, because if one person is destined to do well, to do good, to achieve a lot, to make a lot of money, does that mean that another person is destined to be poor, destined to be an alcoholic, destined to be a drug addict, destined to be a jerk of a person, destined to be divorced, destined to be a miserable person? And I don't believe that's the way that God created us. To me, I believe that God has given us minds so that we can be happy, but I can't, and productive, but I can't figure it out. I'm being personal again, but in my own family, I shared, some of you may have heard me say this, I'm the last man standing in my own family. Everybody in my nuclear family is dead. But I had a sister who was mentally handicapped. She had a stroke at 2. But I had 2 brothers, younger than I am, who, in my opinion, they were a lot smarter than me in school. One of them was not only smarter than me in school, but he was good looking. But both of them seemed to really struggle with issues of self-esteem. Yet, I'm the little guy born in New Orleans. I've just been a happy person all my life. And I have not had any problems with self-esteem. Even at this stage of my life where I'm trying to learn how to cook. I tell my wife all the time, I said, look, I'll cook for you. I said, but my self-esteem is in no way connected to how well or poorly I cook. And I have a difficult time trying to figure out, why is it those guys are dead and I'm still alive? And I'll probably never know the answer to that question. But again, I come back to the issue of free will and destiny. And so we only have a minute or 2 left, but I want you to ask yourself, where do you line up on that question of freedom of will. And what are you doing with the freedom of will that God has given to you? Are you making good use of your body, good use of your mind, good use of your money, good use of your love and your relationships? Or do you find yourself really in a moment of honesty saying, you know, I could have been a better husband. I could have been a better wife. I could have been a better dad, a better mom. I could have been better at work. And I want you to think about that question. You know, I do this program every Saturday, 2:30 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. And it's so gratifying to me because I'm starting to hear now from people all over the country. And, but I want to hear from you. And, you know, some people have called on the telephone, and I've started texting them because they left their number. I asked them, I said, can I text you? And I said, what I do for my church, you know, I'm still actively pastoring in Detroit at the Plymouth United Church of Christ. You can Google that and check out our church services sometime. But, you know, what I do with my church is I text almost every day a prayer to a lot of my members. And I have a number of people who are not members of the church. I text to them too. And so I encourage you to encourage me by just writing me a letter or take the number that's on the screen behind me and just write me. Or you can call it and leave a little message and let me know what this show means to you. I've heard from some very nice people throughout the country who are telling me they look forward to this program every week. So I want to thank you for looking at the program today. That means a lot to me, but it would mean even more if I knew who you are. And so I ask you to, in your own way, contact me. And if your heart would receive it, I encourage you to consider making a little offering, a blessing, to help continue this ministry on the airwaves. Thanks so much for tuning in. God bless, God keep you, and remember, I'm praying for you.
Thank you for watching today's program. We hope you've been blessed in a powerful way. Just knowing you took the time to watch today's broadcast is a great encouragement to Pastor Nick Hood. If this broadcast has been a blessing to you, we ask that you mail a tax-free donation to Nicholas Hood Ministries at 4535 Chrysler Drive, Detroit, Michigan, 48201.
And the point that I'm making is that in everybody's life, at some point, there's a plan B. God is talking to us every step of the way. God is trying to show you something every step of the way. When things seem to be going wrong, that's God's way of opening another door. I am convinced